Hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, the dreaded DM, DBJ, and surrounded by the most wonderful, creative, and supportive community. This channel, RPG with DBJ, we get to talk about a subject in its most longest form on the internet. Yeah, we get to talk about one subject and we talk about it all week long, and we take each day to kind of delve into one aspect of it when it concerns tabletop RPGs. And today we are talking about pantheons. Yes, we're talking about the gods, pantheons of the gods, and how it relates to tabletop RPGs. And today, it being Tuesday, it's Crunch Time Tuesday, and we get to talk about some mechanical features, dice, rules, those kind of things that we might want to include or maybe exclude in our when creating our pantheons and introducing them into our tabletop setting. Just to let you guys know that this show is simulcast on 3 media platforms. It's being live now on Twitch, YouTube, and our Discord server. At least the audio is punched out to our Discord server. Join our Discord server, slide down to the boiler room, and that's where all the cool kids get to hang out. So, to continue something that we were talking about yesterday, in terms of the gods, that one of the strangely best things about our largest example of a pantheon of gods, the Greek/Roman gods, is that them not being the only ones. But if you take a look at these multi-deific mythological pantheons, you'll notice that there's a lot of drama going on. And so I made the suggestion that your favorite trashy soap opera or favorite terrible car crash reality show is a pretty good example of taking ideas from it and using that to run with it when having your pantheon, to have that interaction, as opposed to creating godlike beings that are very static. We can fall into that trope of basically finding a bunch of domains, 38 or so, assigning a god to them, and then they just sit there kind of on their own without doing anything, right? And I when I say conflict of, we can go with the classic, the god of light versus dark, the fire versus ice, or life versus death. You could do that, creation versus destruction. And while classic and pretty simple, while it makes a lot of sense, that binary format, it can get a little bit overused. But I would dare say triangles of interaction. You'll see a lot of soap opera-ish or even YA television shows, young adult television shows, grade school, high school dramas, where one person likes someone else, but the person that has a secret admirer then likes a third person. You start these triangles and these interactions, and then of course hilarity ensues, right? And the same should, I feel like, to make them dynamic, at least as far as the history of your divine beings. I would say that do the same thing with your own pantheon. But since today is Crunch Time Tuesday, I thought we could talk about some of the mechanical features. And one of those mechanical features, which is introduced by Wizards of the Coast in their mythic Odyssey of Theros release, is a trait known as piety. And whether you have something like piety or zealotry or faith or devotion, re-skinning what WotC already has in their Dungeon Master's Guide, known as honor or renown, you could come up with a stat, maybe make the stat in parity with your classic 6 stats of strength, dex, con. You may have this other stat, same thing, runs from 3 to 18, and include something like that in the game. And the reason why you might want to include this other statistic in the game might be your ability or the player character's ability to um, call upon the favor of the gods, or use it as a method of like uh, normally in the game, let's say take your classic cleric, after a rest, they're able to regain some of their capabilities. Maybe, just maybe in the game, some of these capabilities the characters have can only be regained by the amount of favor that they have with their, divine patronage, or at least um, members of the Pantheon that are allied to their side in whatever battle or mission that they're on. So it might not just be, oh, after a rest, the cleric gains back all of their spell slots. It might be, yeah, after the cleric rests and beseeching the gods, make a die roll to see if you're able to gain them back or gain back a particular percentage of them. Another method might be using in the game something that's very underutilized, which are hit dice. Maybe there's an expenditure, like instead of a statistic that you have to with a success failure rate, maybe you come up with a resource that has an expenditure. So I'll just pick something like on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe the character has like begins at 10 points, and as they ask for more and more favors to travel along this mission, it begins to dwindle. So hey, we need to get across this chasm. Hey, the gods, I'm in trouble here. I need your help. And one of the gods, comes down out of the sky or speaks out of the PC's mouth, or, reality shifts and changes or whatever. And the gods build a bridge right in front of their eyes. They go across the chasm. Now they've only got 9 points left, or maybe building that bridge cost them 2 points based on the desired result, or something like that, right? And using an expended resource is a pretty good idea, right? Like because then now the PCs might be hunting for, like, how do I increase my resources? Are we going on? Are we like Jason and the Argonauts or Hercules, and doing the 12 labors, and upon finishing each labor, the statistic goes up? Maybe not. Maybe as the statistic goes down, you start combining that with a die roll. So if you do like a scale of 1 to 10 and they have 7 points left, maybe they have to roll D10 and get like 7 and below to be successful. Roll an 8, 9, or 10, and yep. Yeah, Red Dice Diaries. By the way, guys, for those who don't know, please check out Red Dice Diaries. There's a podcast, blog. Go over to reddicediaries.com if I'm not mistaken, and check that out. But yeah, got to get our hands on that Golden Fleece. Man, I remember that. I bet it's true. If I'm remembering correctly, it was magic when I saw the movie or whatever on the weekends, and it's probably complete trash now. At least as far as the effects go. But man, I used to love those not animatronic, the claymation style, like fighting the skeletons and the removing the heel out of Talos and all that kind of stuff. It's I miss those stories. But stop motion, stop motion by Ray Harryhausen. Thank you there, Red Dice. I love that stop motion. Move them a little bit. Film, move them a little bit. 5 more frames. Move them a little bit. 4 more frames. I made a movie like that. It took, I don't know, 20 hours to make like 30 seconds or something. It's pretty intensive back in the day. Lord Caron, hey, thank you very much for joining there, Lord K. This is for you. You came up with the idea, so I thought I would implement it this week. Now, some other mechanical style effects might be related to the player character's successes and failures, as far as the world changing, right? Like one of the very classic story when it comes to the gods are the heroes must complete missions, or they must stop a great disaster before something befalls the world, right? And in the most recent version of like Clash of the Titans and or Wrath of the Titans, the Great Kraken was released, or um, something was climbing out of a massive volcano or out of the earth or something. There might be some great calamity. And so as the player characters move along, it's also possible that as they expend a resource for success, there's a greater chance that the world might be destroyed, right? So, for example, in many ways, there might be like a countdown timer of sorts. Like in 5 days hence, the world will be destroyed if you don't complete these missions. And so, as they're moving along the path of success, as they expend a resource, hey, Athena, we need your help. Maybe that countdown comes even closer as the gods that are against what you're doing there, your antithesis is like, oh, you've called upon the favor of the gods. Well, I guess I'll have to throw down bolts of lightning or create thunderstorms or reduce the number of hours of daylight until we plunge the world into darkness or something like that. So it could be something external to the player characters that as they expend a resource, things get worse, right? You guys know I'm a huge fan of balanced ratio statistics. So, another example would be, another example would be like, like, I hope you mean like Hercules versus, when you say Hercules versus the Terminator, like Hercules versus like Skynet, where the whatever big bad is out there is being, the heroes must go on their mission, and if the more they fail, the greater the evil, or maybe the players are evil, and whatever their enemies becomes more entrenched into the world. I think so, and you could even make it a mechanical feature, like, for example, the more power the players use. Like, for example, you have your cleric spells, and they have different various levels. And if you use a third level cleric spell, you have a 3 in 10 chance that the enemies of the gods, like, I don't know, the displacer beasts that are sniffing out enemies and hunting them down, you might draw their attention. And that's the mechanical way of like drawing the attention of the gods and their emissaries. And as you're going along your mission, like, you could very well do it as a stealth mission without using anything but cantrips, but maybe, just maybe, you have to use your more powerful abilities. And the more powerful they are, maybe the more, the enemies can literally and or figuratively can sniff you out and hunt you down, and maybe that draws enemies from around the corner or something. So something else that is kind of the opposite of an expenditure, there's um is the as opposed to a high stat that goes low, maybe you might have a low stat that is rejuvenated and goes high. Now, Red Dice Diary says, if I remember correctly, in Jason the Argonauts, Jason could call on the goddess Hera only 5 times for help, but each time he did so, he knew that he was going to have less help in the future. Oh yeah, and listen, we're talking narrative, a narrative thing here, right? So a and this doesn't necessarily need to be reserved for clerics. So let me get away from clerics. Like, for example, when a paladin lays on hands, when a fighter uses their action surge, when the bard uses their inspiration, all of these things could be narratively framed as, calling the favor of the gods, right? Maybe the paladin actually never lays on hands, but calls upon, the the mother of the gods, like a Hera, and maybe her spiritual avatar, or light from the sky, or whatever, golden glow comes, and it's not the paladin doing it, but the paladin asking to allow him to do it, and then an angel or celestial forms and stabilizes an ally or heals them of their wounds or whatnot. Like, it could be the manifestation of something external to the player character, right? You know, the fighter is like, you know, Hermes, lend me your speed or something like that, and then all of a sudden there's like there's wings on the fighter's ankles or something, and he goes into their action surge and then starts you know, opens up a can of whoop ass, you know, speeding through the battlefield or something like that. Like you could very much make it, if you want to do a very like Greek Roman god kind of thing. Now remember, um, while it it would seem that the Greek and Roman pantheon, we have a lot of detail about that. There are plenty of pantheons from around the world. I think one, it's been a long time, but I remember being in school, we did a lot of the Indian gods, the multi-armed Rama and Vashnu and all the elephants, and it was. I just remember. Mind you, I'm saying these not to be stereotypical, but I'm getting a cacophony of information in my head because I remember reading a picture book where there were actual pictures in the book of the different heroes and stuff, and so they tell these stories, and I just remember reading a story about like a mortal hero was like an archer, and he's riding in the chariot of one of the gods, and but this mortal hero could like, he was so good he could like fire these arrows that could like split mountains in half and things like that. And mechanically speaking, you know, when it comes to statistics, maybe like character levels actually correspond to successes and or failures of like the 20 trials. Like, you know, you're immortal and you've been, you know, picked to climb upon the 20 steps to ascend to divinity or something to help us out because, you know, one of the gods has disappeared and there's nothing, you know, we have a policy that we're not allowed to interfere, but you guys can do that. Yeah, Red Dice says I'm a big fan of the ancient Egyptian pantheon for games. Yep, absolutely. I mean, and my thing is, I feel like you can use narrative to change or alter our interaction with the mechanics of the game to make it a real thing, right? Like for example, I had an idea that of like the Egyptian gods. For example, you could make, say, a race of human beings that, you know, that you design a helmet and you put the helmet on, it turns you into your head into an animal, but you turn into the biological form of that, right? Or there might be a race of people where you know, there's hawk-headed and snake-headed and jackal-headed individuals or something. And of course, you could, you know, redesign races and classes that fit into that kind of thing to make a mechanical feature. You know, he foxes says northern gods and goddesses start the end of the world because humanity's technology. Oh, it's like it's the downward spiral, the winter of the gods as they move away because humanity's um, moving more and more towards technology and taking care of themselves. I could see something like that, a technology versus magic kind of thing. Um, yeah, I could see that being like on one hand, the player. I again going back to the balanced statistic. You know, you could have you know, faith in technology, and then the more you go into the faith, the less you have access to or know about using technology, but you can draw upon their divine powers. And then the opposite, right? When your stat goes up in technology, the other one reduces down, and you can actually use the exact same stat. You know, one time you have to roll above it, the other time you have to roll below it to do the thing. Deadman says Shadowrun second edition had exploding dice with initiative. One of the dice rolls, and one guy who rolled like 50 plus for initiative, making him uber fast. Yeah. What is it? Mercury or what's his other name? Uh, wow, I can't remember his other name. Anyway, yeah, it could very much be like a patronage of those individuals as they, you know, cast their spells. Like I could imagine, imagine casting a spell that has like doesn't require concentration. Hermes, thank you. Oh, where? Man, my mind farted. Sorry about that. Um, but yeah, a magic spell. Thank you there. Yeah, it came up a little late. I know you guys were ahead of me. Um, but like casting a spell that doesn't require concentration might be like one of the gods has come down, like the to your wall of force isn't really a wall of force. It's one of the gods that's come down and holding back a massive army or something. And the god's like yelling at you, like, get out of here. I'll hold them back, or something like that. It would be kind of interesting. I like that idea. Red Dice says, perhaps you could use divine blessings as a replacement for a hero point style mechanic. I could see that, like a hero point, inspiration, moxie, fate point kind of thing, as instead it would just be divine blessings. Like, heck, a similar function happened in the classic Conan movie where, Conan is like, Crom, bless me these battles or whatever, and if not, to hell with you. And then, he gets beat down, and what happens? But someone from his past happens to, standing in the light, kind of blinding him, not sure if he really sees her or not. And she comes in with her almost Viking-like armor, blocking a blade that's about to strike him down. And she looks to him like, do you really want to live forever? And boom, disappears, and he stands back up and gets back into the fight. And is it a Deus Ex Machina? Of course it was. But then again, was it part of the story? Like, did he really call upon Crom, the god? And did Crom really send, a spiritual emissary, an avatar of sorts to help him out? Maybe. And is that inspiration? Did your inspiration to cause you to, cause more harm? Did one of the gods stand behind you as you slash with your sword, and your sword slices through the enemy, and all of a sudden, like a 20-foot, Buster sword slices through the person in the same arc after your sword is slashed, and they, you see their body slices in half, and slowly slides off at an angle as their innards squirt out. Sure, why not? Or the god of magic comes down and whispers in your ear and reinforces your spell or something. Yep. Yeah, Deadman says the ultimate example of plot armor. Sure. Yeah, we don't really talk about that too much, right? But again, if you're playing in a game where it's expected that the thing might happen, then I don't see a problem with it. Maybe in the movie they should have given more examples of Crom showing up later, but maybe that was the whole point of it, right? Like, Crom, help me out, doesn't appear. Crom, I'm devoted to you, never comes out. And then the third, it happens in threes, right? In movies where the expectation, flip the expectation. So it's like Crom, nothing, Crom, boom, Crom shows up, helps Conan out. And like a hero point system, I think actually works pretty good with something like that. Now, I made the example of, like using spell or character class features, but really it's the gods. Maybe you might not want to do that if you don't want them walking around every 5 minutes. But with pantheons of gods, I find that it makes perfect sense for them to do so. And like we mentioned yesterday on Monster Monday, and we're going to mention this later on as well, you need to come to a consensus with your players, because the idea that you have these beings walking around that have no statistics, like, it's like, yeah, I know you want to fight the gods, but it's just not going to happen, at least at this point. You're going to have the players get used to that, because again, with so many years under our belt of playing role-playing games, there's usually this idea that if you're going to introduce the thing, then the players have the opportunity to fight the thing, to resist the thing. And it may not be a resistance like one-on-one, but it's resisting as in, I know the god of darkness is literally looking at me from the sky with their eyes blinking in the stars. but I'm going to bring the sun back, and I'm going on that mission, even though it's looking at me directly, in the sky or something. Lord Karen was talking about a space fantasy campaign where Ares is on a spaceship. A version of that was in the movie Gods of no, not Gods of Egypt. Oh, wow. Um, uh, Nikolai Coster-Waldau and someone else was in a movie where the Egyptian gods were depicted as they had like it was more like technology. They could like get these mecha suits on them with wings and other things. They stood about like 12 feet tall compared to everyone else. They were almost like alien beings rather than, I mean, they looked humanoid, but they were like alien benefactors rather than human beings. It was all CGI and things like that. But um, I didn't think it was as bad as people made it out to be. But it was a very unique way of looking at like the Egyptian gods and such. And one of the great things, like I know we're supposed to be in crunch time, crunch time Tuesday here, but dynamic pantheons, I think, is a thing that when you start making one god having one domain, I think we start to not just pigeonhole ourselves, but we reduce our creativity. I think multiple, as if you listen to the say podcast that Red Dice Diaries, um, the Purple Worm podcast, you'll know that he says the same thing, that like having uh, multiple domains for the gods makes a lot of sense, as well as giving them dominion over things that might not seem like they belong together, but they do, so that you have, it's not like a cleric worships a single individual and that's it. It's more like the cleric, the faithful, believes in all of the gods. They just happen to beseech one or a few of them for a different thing. Like, for example, you know, when you want to increase your speed or send a message, the Hermes comes is the power that you draw upon. Whereas if you want to transform your shape or make yourself look enticing, it's Athena that or Aphrodite, I'm sorry, that's the one whose power you're summoning. And in that sense, I suppose you could mechanically grant slash restrict certain capabilities from um, certain player characters. So you might be restricted from using, say, a darkness spell if you're literally fighting against the powers of darkness, right? Or you could literally explain it as in like one of the avatars of the god or a demigod or something grants you the darkness spell because they want to see their father brother or something like that fall in power. Maybe they're using you as a proxy in their interdimensional war, standing up on high. And like Red Dice, yep. Red Dice says, yes, certainly. If you are a fisherman going out in ancient Greece, you'd offer some prayers to Poseidon. As a matter of fact, that still exists today. Every, as far as I know, every major naval craft is christened first, and they put a plaque on that ship. And sailors, even till today, beseech the gods or a godlike figure in their own religion to grant them safety. And they still christen ships with a bottle of champagne and breaking it against it and the whole 9 yards, right? So now, sure, I mean, in reality, dude, when they're taking the champagne bottle against the yacht, are they thinking about the gods? Probably not. They're thinking about, this cost me $8.6 million, and I'm going to enjoy it with a bunch of underage girls. And ooh, maybe I'm thinking a little bit too reality here. Anyway, but you get my point, right? Um, yeah, like He Foxes says, a spell where you call on Zeus where your enemy. Oh, so extrapolating, right? Let's say you're a druid. I'm picking Heath Jose's comment here. So let's say you're a druid and you use a lightning bolt or a call lightning spell. Maybe it's not you are not casting a lightning spell, even though that's how it's described. But like the clouds roil and roll and split open, and Zeus is literally there from the chest up. Brings his hand back, pulls out a lightning bolt, and throws it down to the ground, slamming it into the enemy. Right. Um, Narratively, I think that's a great image. Even though it may seem kind of like the player didn't do it, in the context of talking about pantheons, I think that would be a great scene, narratively speaking, even if it is, you know, even if you're attaching personalities and motivations to character class options, right? And it's a great way for even the players to have interaction. When the druid is standing there at a highest peak on a mountain, begging the gods to help them out, and Thor's up there in the sky, and his beard's there and everything. Yeah, yeah, Kitty, I know, but no one can watch you and your bumhole. Yeah, just have a seat right there. And when Thor is there, and a bolt of lightning strikes across the sky, and Thor's got an attitude or something with the druid, and is like, you know, you're in your battle against the gods. I'll help you out, but you must do something for me. You must resist all manner of Loki's distractions or something like that. And here, boom, slams the druid in the chest with a bolt of lightning from his hammer, and goes about his business. And the druid gets up, smoking chest and all, and is like, "Wow, I've gotten my spell slots back. Thank you, there, Thor." Yeah, I mean, I think the concept of that is great. Red Dice says, so the PC is acting as the earthly conduit for the gods' power, enabling them to interact with the mortal world. Of course, how the gods always have these rules of like non-interaction, and that non-interaction, of course, they're getting around the rules by having the player characters represent them. I think that makes perfect sense, and it's also makes sense, like, because a lot of times players are going to scratch their head like, why do they need me? I'm 5th level when they could just defeat their own enemy. And it's like, well, they made this pact, and it's how things are. Once they make a handshake rule, it changes reality. So Red Dice continues to say, this might be a handy way of gods getting around, yep, a prohibition about messing with the mortal world. Could also explain why they want worshippers. And again, it might be one of these things where they like, it's the 4-year-old or the 6-year-old's uh, idea of how the world works, kind of, because a lot of times the gods can be pretty damn petty. So it could be them agreeing to a thing, and then a third party screws up the conditions, but they still have to agree to the thing, right? Like it's the classic. I hate to bring in real world religion, but it's the classic God versus Satan, right? And it's like, oh, they agreed not to interfere with mortal realm, and it's like, well, Satan broke the rules, sure, but God didn't, right? Like some people take that kind of thing, and it might be that kind of thing with the gods, like, oh, all the good ones decided not to involve themselves, all the evil ones are like releasing demons out of the 9 hells, or out of the bottom pits of the abyss, and by doing so, yeah, they broke the rules, and now the PCs need to set it straight because the other gods agreed to of non-interference. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a immortal. In the distant future, Earth is occupied by ancient gods and genetically altered humans. When a god is sentenced to death, he seeks a new human host and a woman to bear his child. It's not. No, that's not the one. But it sounds very much like it. This was one that was released rather recently. I want to say within 5 years. Gerard Butler. um, Nicholas Coster-Waldau and some other young guy who plays like a young, scrawny mortal thief, and they meet. I can't. Oh, my brain isn't working. Um, Lord Karen says D&D gods versus 40k gods. I see. I think it was called Gods of Egypt, right? Thank you there, Kevin. And thanks for popping in there, dude. Yeah, it was. I think it was Gods of Egypt. I see. I thought it was wrong, but I was mistaken. Yeah. Yeah. Charlie Square says the same thing. Yeah, it was all CGI. They were like 12 feet tall. They had these like golden. They could summon on these golden mecha suits and whatnot and fight each other and such. Yeah, and there was a mortal human being that was going along, literally going on an adventure with one of the gods. It might have been Horus or something like that. I don't remember which Egyptian mythology they were following, kind of. But yeah, and of course, there's always something where the gods are always entranced with humanity anyway. So why not? Red Dice says perhaps when they were drafting the divine mandate, some trickster god purposefully built in, channeling through mortals as a loophole. I I think that works just as well. Yep, Gerard Butler was Set. Yep. Um, and then Nicholas Cost was Horus. You're portraying Horus and stuff. Yep, Set. And it's funny how a lot of times in these mythological in the mythological pantheons, it's like the god of like death and treachery. It's like, oh, we're just going to invite them too. We won't expect the god of treachery to backstab us, and then of course it happens. Yep, Chadwick Boseman plays Thoth. Yep, absolutely. What, somebody else? Charlie Squared. I guess I wasn't the only one that lost 2 hours and 10 minutes of my life. Yeah. Oh no, I know you reposted it, dead man, but it doesn't. What what the heck just happened? I got a double. You didn't do that, dead man. I think it doubled up on me. That's weird. Discord is very weird now. All right, it went away. It's weird. Charlie Square's like, more like 35 minutes with my mom. Yeah, shut it off. Yeah, it wasn't very good. Yep. There it is, Gods of Egypt. Yep. There, mortal hero Beck teams with the god Horus in an alliance against Set, the merciless god of darkness, who has usurped Egypt's throne, plunging the once peaceful and prosperous. Blah 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 blah. You get the whole point, right? And of course, a lot of times, like I was talking about, gods acting like 4-year-olds. Their dominion. Most of them are so hyper focused on their own dominion they can't see past them the dominion of magic that they have. So a lot of times they have to learn through mortals, which is another thing as well. The players teaching the gods, like a lone wolf and cub scenario where the players have a certain mission. The gods are like the epitome of what the player characters are focused on, and then you learn the lesson of, well, maybe we shouldn't be this way because the gods are acting exactly the way we are, and look how much destruction they're causing. Maybe we need to change our way to teach them to change their ways. That kind of stuff. Yep. Yeah. um yeah, everybody. Yeah, Red Dice is like, dude, don't watch it. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. He Fox says a campaign where God is magic and Satan is a robot. I suppose you could do things like that. And now, mind you, the you know another hard part here is to get our heads out of the idea that despite the gods being all powerful, that they actually aren't all powerful, that they don't know everything. Oh yeah, Mecha Satan. I'm sure it has to exist somewhere. It has to. I don't know where, but something like that has all. If we're creating off the top of our heads, it has to exist out there somewhere, probably in some kind of like anime or something like that. It has to exist in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, Cthulhu tech. Yeah, well, yeah. Ugh. Yeah, love the Lovecraftian gods awakening, or heck, maybe the Lovecraftian gods are already awake, and the players are navigating in this world. Um, there's an old Thulian setting for fifth edition someone created that I still have. I've never used it either. It's like Conan meets Cthulhu. Um, Red Dice says, I know Kevin Crawford does a game called Godbound where you play lesser deities imbued with power from the destruction of the previous Pantheon. That's a pretty cool idea. Yeah, and even like I think White Wolf during its last heyday had a version of that where, much like when White Wolf gaming company started where you could play a vampire or a werewolf, Scion. Thank you very much. I was waiting for somebody to put that in there. Yeah, Scion, where you're immortal and you wake up, and on the front cover, there's like a blonde haired dude with a 6-shooter in his hand, like a big pistol, and the hammer of the pistol is made with a piece of uru, which is created from Thor's hammer. I believe is the example in the example art on the front cover. Like you're immortal and you realize that you've been reawakened and you've been one of the gods and you've been asleep this entire time, which, mind you, makes perfect sense for like Dungeons and Dragons, right? Because players go from zero to hero pretty quickly, and as each of the players you start to surpass a different tier of play, like it goes from tier 1 to tier 4 generally, so um they go from like first to third or fourth level, and then from like fifth to seventh or eighth level and so on, and that might be the exaltation. Yep, it exalted. You play as a demigod. Yep, reawakened, not knowing your power. Although in exalted, you're kick-ass right out the gate, right out the box. But absolutely, Thor and power armor. Yeah, like Red Dice says, things get crazy fast in that game. And again, here's an idea where if you really want to turn the volume up as a game master to allow your world to be like reshaped by the machinations of your players and the bad guy. Can one of your players literally cast a lightning bolt that can shatter a mountain? Maybe so. Can they throw their spear into the ground and change the path of a river, or drink what's one of the things, drinking all of the water out of a lake or something like that? I mean, would you allow that in the game? Kind of wild, but I would say yes. I'd say yes. In the United States, having the states being formed far later than many cultures around the world, there's a character known as Paul Bunyan that fits the role of the demigodhood of an individual, um, in a mythological setting, much like an exalted or something like that, where you have this person that's not even larger than life. They are they are uh, demigodish in their capabilities, right? I'm going to take my blue ox and stretch this winding river out into a straight line, like it's things like that. So reshaping the world that way with those capabilities, I think that would be kind of fun, and you really have to let go. Kevin Wilson says, the gods of heaven die; they fall to the earth, and they have to gain power in mortal form to take them back to heaven when their mortal form dies. The more power they gain, the more powerful their god form is, which is a perfect example of like how in the game Exalted works, and it also is a perfect example of like player character capabilities, right? Your first and second level, and then when you get to third level and you become part of your archetype, maybe you actually, you're finding, much like the classic module of the finding the rod of 7 parts, which is a perfect example of finding a rod that has 7 parts. It could be finding a spiritual or even physical elements of yourself out there as you start, walking upon the steps, trying to walk up the steps to reach godhood or something like that. Um, Deadman says in Exalted, you can make a starting character that can do over 200 dice of damage in one blow from the start. That's ridiculous, but it's when you go get your bucket of dice and you want to play a game like that, yeah, it works. Kitty. Red Dice says at least in Exalted they came up with with new rule systems rather than trying to bend the concept into the old World of Darkness rules. Yeah, they needed to do that. Nothing wrong with the game Exalted. It doesn't work when you try to incorporate World of Darkness. And believe me, I tried. It quickly, it nearly immediately fails. Charlie says maybe the 7 parts were the friends we made along the way. Upbeat 80s music. I can't do the music, but yes, I know you're being funny, but a lot of those stories actually are. Yeah, hold up that boom box. Yep. rolling the sleeves back on the trench coat with the padded shoulders. Yeah. Um, but a lot of the gods are dead, but maybe they're coming alive. Are elements where maybe the player characters are navigating the world, and to gain a level, they need to find various individuals. Like, oh, we need to find the messenger god, and maybe the messenger god is bedridden or in a wheelchair or something, right? Or the god of fire is living in the frigid cold, freezing, sitting in a cave or something, and you have to go collect them back. Like it might be like a fetch quest of sorts, but gaining like NPCs who represent the different members of the pantheon of gods, and the new pantheon is taken over, and the players are trying to, much like it would be as if the Titans themselves came back, cast out the Olympian gods of Zeus and that whole inbred pantheon, forgot who they were, and the Titans have always been on Olympus, and now it's the mission of the unawakened Hermes and Zeus and Aphrodite and Athena and Demeter and the rest of them to take out the Titans once more, right? Um, oh man, all right, man. Hey, Kev, have a great one. Yeah, and for those who don't know, Kev played in a game that we just aired recently. It's on the channel. It didn't air live, but I did post it up. And this coming Sunday will be another episode in it, and it takes place in a setting in a Dead Man's Guide to Dragon Grin. It's a world known as Dragon Grin. It's like a dark, high fantasy, dark, gritty world where evil has won. A person known as the Dismembered Lord has dominated the landscape, and the player characters are playing in a world where being a hero could mean your untimely demise. Yeah, and by the way, also if you want to see how I DM, you can check that out. I'm extra critical of myself, but whatever. Yeah, Charlie, it's like I've seen weirder stuff in RPG sessions. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Deadman says, would it be like Guardians of the Galaxy? That's actually a, a good analogy, where the Guardians of the Galaxy are like members of disparate, like we really shouldn't be together, but we are thrown together, and then once they've gotten together, they represent they're greater than their parts, right? Heck, even in what is it, Peter Quill, finds out that he's part celestial, right? I guess that fits in. And heck, if you wanted to make it sci-fi, I think that, well, like a sci science fiction fantasy, that kind of works too. Lord Karen's like Terminator's version of mythological creatures control cyborg gods and goddesses. You're really into this thing, aren't you? Anyway, Red Dice says you've also got the Forgotten Realms Time of Troubles option, where the deities are cast out of the heavens in a powerful mortal form and are trying to find a way to regain divinity. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I mean. Yep, and Dead Man puts in the clip the dancing clip. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Where Quill grabs the power stone. Um, and the other members of the Guardians of the Galaxy grab his hand to allow him to survive, grabbing the thing that could very well end his life, and of course, plot armor. But I mean, that's the whole point of it, right? They, it's expectation, and then subvert expectation, right? And honestly, I think that's a great story element, and like I said, you could very easily tie it to a mechanical feature in the game. A level system would mean that you've achieved a certain, like, oh, you have to. I know I'm being silly here. There are 19 gods you must awaken, and your first level, you're one of those divine beings that has forgotten who they are, and you need to remain under the radar of the evil Pantheon that now controls the heavens or something. Go out into the world and be fruitful. All right, well, we've gotten a third level. We found our, second or third or fifth deity and awaken them, and we need to move on, And as a matter of fact, if you, because I was going to bring this up in Third Pillar Thursday, when you're fifth level and the world has already been plunged into darkness, when you find the god of light, now maybe the day and night cycle then begins again, right? Like the gods themselves represent different elements of the world. Maybe when you find them, they become the element that is necessary for the world. So maybe the world is like Dark Sun, where there are no oceans, but when you find the Neptune / Poseidon like deity who awakens, now all of a sudden there are rivers and oceans and things that begin, or maybe the rain begins that hasn't happened for 1,000 generations or something, right? But that's a third pillarism I was going to bring up. Fox says a campaign where the gods and the world's races are given magic to defend killer robot drow spiders. You love your cyborg mixing in your technological cybernetic stuff into this Dungeons and Dragons, and I don't have a problem with that. I really don't. I mean, I'm imagining. I suppose if you wanted to do that, it could be like it could be this, again, like talking about the mechanisms of the world when evil is trying, of course, to dominate the world and subjugate everyone, of course, because the player characters are the good guys, at least in this context. Yeah, gnomish god. I was thinking about that, gnomish devices, steampunking, and all that kind of stuff. I could imagine people being like harnessed for their dreams, or locked away in chambers with wires in their heads and things like that, if you wanted to add more of like a technological element to it. And it depends on the story you want to tell, right? Is it like maybe you want to run a game where it's nature versus industry, and the player characters are all like barefoot, tribalist styled versions of all of the options in the world, and then there is an equal and opposite technological version of those same entities. Or maybe the player characters are on the side of industry, and the primordials, the elemental powers, are trying to invade in, and the player characters are like, okay, we need to. There's a new Pantheon in town. Instead of like earth, air, fire, water, it's alloys and smog and electricity and data or something, and they're the new kids in town or something. I don't know. It could be. Red Dice says that could be interesting. So what if the god of death is missing? Do people just not die? That could leave some massive repercussions. Yeah. The god of death, people can't die, but they're still suffering in the manner in which they would normally have died, but they haven't. So people that were in burning buildings are still suffering for being burned. That's pretty nasty. Ooh. But I like it. Like, well, considering something like that, if the let's go back to the Greek and Roman gods, right? If Hades was kicked out by the Titans, and Hades is the god of death because we need Hades to be part of our pantheon, I could see that being a thing, right? Nobody likes Hades to begin with, but listen, they're family, and you don't talk about family, right? You know what I mean? It could be something. I mean, that's very much into godlike pantheons where yeah, he Fox says, "I love science fantasy." Yeah, hashtag D&D tech dragon gods. Yeah. What's the anime? Um, Super Bestial Mecha God Machine. Dan Cougar Requiem for the Victims or something. It's some long name like that. I think it's Super Bestial Mecha God Machine, if I'm not mistaken, is the name of like an old '80s anime. Um, I dare, I dare you, dead man, to find it if it's out there. Super Bestial Mecha God Machine. Anyway, they're because we're getting to the end here. Didn't really talk too much about mechanics so much, although having uh Tess Dan Kuga. There we are. Super Beast Mecha Machine God. There it is. I'm sure maybe either I'm recalling it mistakenly, which is more likely than not, or it was Americanized. There was something in it that was Americanized. Yeah, I don't think it was as notable as Gundam, but yeah, which kind of I don't know if you would want to if you could really do this in Dungeons and Dragons, but I suppose it would be kind of a really cool thing for the player characters to get to the point where they are advancing in the story to create their own mecha to go up against the kaiju, which are the other gods that they need to defeat, and they need to gather all the materials that they need to get together to create the thing to have the Titanic battle in the first place. Which I could see, mechanically speaking, this might be difficult to emulate where, oh, the player characters are going to destroy the gods that literally have no stats, but it might be a foregone conclusion that they would win anyway. If the player characters are like 19th level and the whole point is for them to get to 20th level to do battle with the gods, while I understand the players might want to roll the dice for that kind of thing, it might be a foregone conclusion that the fact that they've got like 99% of the way there, the rest of it might just be narrated that they've won, right? Like if you've done that much of it, it might be a thing. Yeah, I couldn't remember which Torchwood one it was. Deadman says Torchwood Miracle Day. All people are made immortal except the main protagonist, who is normally immortal. Yes, and no one could die. And I think it even created such a problem, like a plane would crash and the people in the plane crash were still alive, that the government was taking people and putting them into ovens to deal with the massive problem of people going packing hospitals where they should die. And I think there was even a main character who had like a dad or a grandfather that kept having a heart attack over and over and over again because they couldn't die. This is in relationship to the god of death being missing and no one can die, right? Heck, getting impaled or drowning and doing that forever might not be a thing a player character wants to see happen, even if they're like, oh, no death saves, great, and you're like, yeah, wait till you see what happens. you know if you like mecha and fantasy, I'd recommend the Vision of Escalaflone, es Escalflane. I don't. Es Escaflowne when it comes to anime. I am butchering that. I am absolutely butchering that. Super Beast Machine God, Dan Kuga. Escaflowne. There we go. Thank you very much, there, Red Dice. Lord Lord Karen's like, can I run a campaign one day? Maybe. I guess. I You don't need my permission to do that. Oh, although you're probably referring to running a campaign with me, in which case, maybe we'll figure something out. Maybe. I have a particularly tight schedule. So yeah, you guys know I'm going to have to get ready to go to work soon anyway. But anyway, guys, all week long we're talking about pantheons. Join me tomorrow. Join me the rest of the week. We get to talk about gods and goddesses and creating pantheons and how to introduce them into the game. So yeah, why not? Why not have these things? Anyway, thank you very much for being part of the show. By the way, spread the word, like, share, subscribe, go over to Twitch or YouTube, share it on your social media. But above all, thank you very much for watching. And guys, have a great one. I will see you tomorrow for World Building Wednesday. See ya. Bye.